The 4th of January, 2025. The air in Pensacola, Florida, was warm and humid, a stark contrast to the chilling violence that was about to unfold. Star Michael Tucker, a California native, had found her home here. A woman of many talents, she had served her country in the Air Force before graduating from Florida A&M University with a nursing degree. Her life was a testament to resilience and dedication, a vibrant light that shined through the darkness of others. She was a single mother, working to build a stable and happy life for herself and her young son. Her world revolved around him, a small, beautiful universe she fiercely protected. Then, Charles Carson entered her life. Their relationship was new, just a few months old, and to Star Michael's family, it seemed to be a happy one. They had no idea that a monster lurked just beneath the surface. The sweet and innocent facade. The early days of a new relationship are often filled with excitement and discovery. Getting to know someone new, the shared laughter, the quiet moments, it's a time of pure, unadulterated hope. Star Michael's sister Rhea saw this happiness firsthand. When asked about her new boyfriend, Star Michael couldn't stop smiling. She had no complaints. Everything seemed to be going well. Charles appeared to be sweet, innocent, and completely devoted to her. From an outsider's perspective, they looked like the perfect couple, a match made in a sun-drenched coastal town. Rhea was relieved that her sister had found someone who seemed to bring her joy. She looked for red flags, but there were none to be found in the few short months they had been together. The illusion of a perfect partnership was so meticulously crafted that no one, not even those who loved her most, saw the impending storm, the unseen shift. The placid waters of their relationship began to stir. About 3 or 4 months in, a subtle shift occurred. The sweet and innocent demeanor that had charmed everyone began to crack, revealing a sinister intensity simmering just beneath the surface. Something, no one knows what, allegedly snapped inside of Charles. The seemingly happy couple was now navigating an invisible minefield, one that only Star Michael could feel. On a quiet night in early January, the peace was shattered. The Escambia County Sheriff's Office received a call that would change everything. The call was a report of a homicide at a local apartment complex. A woman had been found shot, her body lying lifelessly on the ground. A new investigation had begun, a search for a killer that would soon lead them down a dark and twisted path, the scene of the crime. The crime scene was a picture of pure devastation. Responding deputies found a woman's body, riddled with bullets, at the apartment complex. The victim was quickly identified as Star Michael, the woman who had been a source of light for so many. The sheriff's report painted a gruesome picture. At least 15 shots had been fired at her, with 7 of those bullets hitting their mark. It wasn't a crime of passion, it was an act of brutal, calculated violence. The sheer number of shots showed a rage that transcended a simple argument. It was pure, unadulterated fury. Star Michael, the mother, the nurse, the veteran, was gone. The deputies on the scene were shocked by the level of violence, but they had yet to discover the most horrifying detail of all: unimaginable brutality. The scene was already horrific, but the killer had not been content with just a hail of bullets. The deputies' investigation uncovered a detail so sinister, it defied belief. After he shot her, the killer took her own Jeep and ran her over. But that wasn't enough to satisfy his rage. He then backed up over her body before finally speeding away. Star Michael was rushed to a nearby hospital, but the severity of her injuries was too great. She succumbed to her wounds, and her family's worst fears were confirmed. Sheriff Chip Simmons, an experienced law enforcement officer, was shaken. Whatever triggered this, obviously it's unwarranted, this use of violence, he told reporters. But to use this level of violence, this level of brutality, it's uncalled for. The search for her killer was on, and a manhunt would begin that would cross state lines. The trail of a fugitive, the killer's escape, was meticulously planned. but he left a trail of breadcrumbs in his wake. The Jeep Cherokee, a crucial piece of evidence, was eventually located in neighboring Alabama. The discovery of the vehicle was a huge break in the case, but the real shock came when authorities discovered who had been behind the wheel. It was Charles, Star Michael's seemingly sweet and innocent boyfriend. He had driven for hours, desperately trying to put distance between himself and the heinous crime he had just committed. But he was not as clever as he thought. His flight across state lines and his bizarre actions after the murder would ultimately lead to his capture. He was a man on the run, but the truth was, there was nowhere left for him to hide from the justice that awaited him. The bizarre confession: a few moments after the shooting, a phone call was made. Charles allegedly contacted the father of Star Michael's child. What could he possibly want to say? The father's heart must have skipped a beat as he listened to Charles's chilling words. Charles allegedly told him that Star Michael was dead and that he didn't want to talk about what happened. It was a cold, calculated admission, a perverse act of cruelty. Why would he call the man who was so closely tied to Star Michael? It seemed he was trying to inflict pain, to revel in his own heinous act. Authorities were baffled by the confession, but they knew it was a crucial piece of the puzzle. It would be the first of many calls that would seal his fate. The unexpected witness as deputies canvassed the crime scene. A call came into 911. That would be the key to cracking the case. A man, who wished to remain anonymous, told dispatchers he knew where Charles was located. The man's voice was shaky, but his information was invaluable. He told the police that he had worked with Charles and would often drop him off at the very apartment complex where the murder occurred. His knowledge of the location and his connection to the suspect gave the police a solid lead. He was a witness from an unlikely source, a man who just wanted to do the right thing. The manhunt for Charles was getting closer, and the police were about to close the net on their suspect, the text message trail. The coworker who called 911 wanted to help the police, but he was also concerned for Charles. He reportedly texted Charles, asking if he was okay. The response was a chilling admission of guilt. "Not at all," he continued, allegedly confessing to the horrific crime he had just committed. "I shot Star Michael like 16 times, he claimed. The text message trail was a direct line to the killer's mind, a window into the rage and brutality that had consumed him. He allegedly claimed that everything was good between them, and then something had sent him into a rage. The details were vague, but the confession was not. He had shot his girlfriend, and now he was on the run. The evidence was piling up, and Charles was digging himself into a deeper hole with every passing minute. The chase is on. The police were hot on his trail. The coworker's information gave them a clear idea of where Charles was headed. He was reportedly under a bridge on his way to Mobile, Alabama. The deputies, working with the coworker, devised a plan. They asked him to call Charles back so they could listen in and get more information. The coworker agreed, and a tense phone call was about to take place. It showed that his crime was not a local affair, but a federal one, and that he would be held accountable for his actions on a national level. The stakes were getting higher, and his legal battle was just beginning. Count 3. Carrying a handgun. Count 3 of the indictment was a charge of knowingly and carrying a handgun during and in relation to a crime of violence. This charge was a clear sign that the federal government was taking his actions seriously. The gun was not a random item, it was a key part of the crime. By carrying it with him, he had knowingly committed a crime of violence. This charge, when combined with the others, painted a picture of a man who was not only a killer, but also a cold and calculated criminal. The gravity of the charges was beginning to mount, and his fate was looking grimmer with each new revelation. Count 4. Discharging a firearm. Count 4 of the indictment was even more specific. Charles was accused of knowingly discharging, using, and carrying a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. The sheer number of shots fired, 15 or more, was an important part of this charge. It showed that he didn't just carry a gun, he used it with brutal efficiency. The crime was not a single random act of violence, it was a series of premeditated actions. This charge, more than any other, captured the sheer, unadulterated rage that he had unleashed on Star Michael. It was a clear sign that his fate was sealed. Count 5. The prior conviction. The final charge in the indictment, Count 5, was a shocking revelation. Charles was accused of knowingly possessing a firearm and ammunition in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, despite having a prior conviction for a crime punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year. According to the indictment, he was convicted of criminal mischief in Texas in August 2024. This charge added another layer of legal trouble for Charles and showed that his violent tendencies were not new. He was a man with a criminal past, and his actions were a culmination of a lifetime of bad choices. The indictment was a full picture of the man who had taken Star Michael's life. The motive as the legal proceedings moved forward, people began to wonder, why? What would possess a man who seemed so sweet and innocent to commit such a heinous act? Criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer weighed in on the matter. She speculated that Star Michael may have rejected him in some way. The rejection, she believed, caused him to fly off the handle and ultimately to commit a horrific act of violence. This theory was a chilling reminder that behind a seemingly perfect facade, there could be a deep-seated rage waiting to explode. It was a theory that made a lot of sense, especially when you considered the brutality and overkill of the crime. A rage rooted in the past. Safa Robinson Ferrer went a step further in her analysis. She suggested that the rage could be rooted in childhood. She speculated that Charles may have been rejected in certain ways throughout his childhood, and that these traumas had perpetuated into his adult life. He was a man with a troubled past, and he had learned to deal with his feelings in a violent and dangerous way. His behavior was not a result of one single act, but a culmination of a lifetime of untreated mental health issues. He had made the decision to use violence against anyone who may have rejected him, and Star Michael was his final victim. This theory was a sobering reminder of the importance of mental health and the dangers of untreated trauma. The bizarre aftermath. Charles's behavior after the shooting was bizarre and confusing. Most people who commit a crime like this would try to keep a low profile, but he did the exact opposite. He made phone calls, he allegedly confessed to the crime, and he even fled in Star Michael's car. Safa Robinson Ferrer called his actions absolutely bizarre. She suggested that he may have been suffering from an untreated mental illness, or that he was a man who believed, if I can't have you, no one else will. It was a chilling thought, but it was the only explanation that made sense. His actions were not a result of a clear mind, they were a result of a disturbed and dangerous one. The defense strategy of Safa Robinson Ferrer were his attorney. What would she do? She admitted that it was a difficult case to defend. The first line of defense, I didn't do it, would not be applicable here due to the overwhelming evidence against him. The next line of defense would be to challenge his mental state at the time of the crime. She would argue that he was not in his right mind, that he was provoked, and that he was not competent to stand trial. She would also look for any legal technicalities that could get the case thrown out. She was not a man who could easily defend himself, but he would have his day in court. The crystal ball. When asked to predict how the case would play out, Safa Robinson Ferrer said she believed it would likely end in a plea deal. Charles was being prosecuted on both the state and federal levels, and he was facing life in prison. A plea deal would allow him to avoid the death penalty in exchange for a guilty plea to the charges. It was a common way for these types of cases to be resolved, especially when the evidence against the defendant was so overwhelming. His life, he had said, was over, and a plea deal would ensure that he would spend the rest of it in prison. Justice, in the end, would be served.